Prior to the First Martian Revolution, a disgruntled miner named Orion had become extremely resentful to the Ultor Corporation due to their mistreatment of the workforce, treating him and the other miners like slaves. Orion, like many others before him, was born and raised on Mars, and had been working in the mines since he graduated from the Ultor schools. Ultor was the only life he'd ever known. Growing up, his parents rarely mentioned their previous lives back on Earth, and would constantly tell him that there was nothing worth going back to, and that they were better off living on Mars. Orion never believed them, and he hated them for it. He dreamed of the day that he could leave Mars behind him, and never have to set foot in a mine again. As Orion was growing up, he met a young girl named Eos, who also shared his hatred for the evil corporation, wanting just as much to escape Mars, and rid her life of Ultor. Orion and Eos began meeting up secretly, planning and sketching out ideas on how they would destroy Ultor, deciding the best methods for attacks and sabotage. Orion was extremely careful setting up the meetings, and would constantly change the locations, in order to remain under Ultor's radar. The duo soon established themselves as a resistance group, to stand up for the oppressed miners, and wipe Ultor from the face of the planet. Orion soon came up with the name Red Faction, a name that Eos thought suited the group very well, as it symbolized all those that were rising up, and fighting for their freedom. Orion soon discovered an abandoned sector of the mining complex, deep below level N17, which he and Eos quickly turned into the Red Faction base, with its location only known to a select few. Orion immediately began training new recruits inside the base, teaching them how to use firearms, explosives, and learning guerrilla tactics. They were also successful in stealing an Ultor submarine, which they managed to transport back to the Red Faction base, using it to teach new recruits how to handle the vehicle. Orion soon became well respected amongst members of the Red Faction, due to his leadership and teaching skills. Eos soon promoted Orion to lieutenant, making him second in command of the Red Faction, and next in line to lead the movement in the event of her own death. Orion and Eos soon began intensifying their attack methods, targeting Ultor's infrastructure, such as power plants, ammo depots, and guard barracks. It was dirty work, but it had to be done. When the revolt finally began, Orion helped lead the first wave of Red Faction fighters against the Ultor security forces, as well as important locations, targeting the numerous geothermal plants across the colony. This gave the Red Faction an upper hand very quickly, enabling them to launch massive offensives against the corporation, causing devastating losses to the security forces. Orion was later tasked with escorting an Ultor VP named Griffin to the Red Faction base, where he was questioned by Eos about the origins of the mysterious plague. During this time, Orion continued to train more recruits within the Red Faction base, and eagerly waited for his mission from Eos. Orion later assisted Eos with attacking the lab of Axel Capek, by driving a stolen Ultor ATV through a canyon in the Badlands. They encountered heavy resistance from the security forces, and Orion knew that it wouldn't be any easier on the journey back. Not taking any chances, Eos gave Orion a computer disk, containing an encrypted SOS message, specifically coded for the EDF to receive. She instructed him to give it to Parker, if he came back instead of her, and to then escort Parker to the Ultor Communications Center, located at the top of the canyon. As Parker made his way up to the communications center, Orion traveled back to the Red Faction base by foot, and eagerly waited to hear word of Eos, fearing that his leader was dead. During this time, Orion took command of the Red Faction, and continued to strike Ultor at every opportunity. When Eos returned to the base alive, Orion was glad to resume his position of second in command. During the mercenary attack on the Red Faction base, Orion helped defend the base until they were overrun, and had no choice but to retreat. Orion soon joined forces with Hendrix, an Ultor security technician, who betrayed the corporation, and had been assisting the Red Faction since the beginning of the revolution. The group then headed to the mercenary base of the infamous Masako Regiment, who had captured Eos during the attack on the Red Faction base, and were planning on destroying the entire mining complex with a bomb. Orion was soon cut off from the rest of the attack group, but sent Parker into the base to assist Hendrix, and save Eos.